Rocky Top Insider presents the RTI Rim Runner with Bob Baskerville and Ryan Shumpert.
Welcome. Time for another edition. We are winding it down. College basketball season is drawing to a close, but another edition of the RTI Rim Runner is here, and we have a lot of things to talk about. I'm Bob Baskerville, joined as always by Ryan Shumpert, back from Chicago. Was it a little cold up there? I think it was, right, Shump?
It was, yeah. No, it was kind of a tease when we got in on Wednesday night. It was fantastic, upper 60s, lower 70s, but then we got a cold front that rolled in on Thursday, and chilly the rest of the week, but, glad to be back in Knoxville. It's beautiful down here. So,
oh, yeah.
Fully spring.
Most definitely. Well, like I said, we got a jam-packed show for you today. Of course, at this point, we're about to enter Final Four weekend, and while the Vols aren't still playing basketball season is hardly over for Rick Barnes and the coaching staff. We'll take stock of a program that frustrated us more times than we'd like to admit this season, but also had some really high moments and built some real momentum at the most important time of the year. They made it to their third straight Elite Eight, but alas, they again hit a roadblock in the form of another elite opponent, ending their season. More important, though, we'll focus on the road ahead because the activity building towards the 26-27 season is already well underway for the Vols, coinciding with the soon-to-open transfer portal. Ryan and I will also take a look at the last four teams standing in Indianapolis, give you our predictions for the final three games of what's been an outstanding college basketball season. And we'll also have a little fun traveling down memory lane as we pick what each of us feel are the biggest late game shots in NCAA tournament history. And I'm pretty sure, at least for my own sake, one of them just happened in the past weekend. But before all that, I want to remind you to like and subscribe to our show. If you're checking us out on the Rocky Top Insider YouTube channel, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe button. Or if you're listening to us as a podcast, we love that too. Just make sure you download us, make us part of your podcast rotation. We are available wherever you listen to your podcasts. The opening tip, the Vols Sweet 16 weekend in Chicago started on a high note with a very late night win against Iowa State, and ends with the Vols being totally outclassed by a one-seed Michigan. Ryan, in that Friday night Sweet 16 game, the Cyclones were the favorite, but they were also missing their best player. All-American Joshua Jefferson was out, and the Vols, to me, felt like they seized that opportunity. And I thought the game plan for this one was just outstanding. It was tight for a while, but Tennessee choked them out in the second half.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And, you knew that Joshua Jefferson was going to be such a big loss for Iowa State if he couldn't go because of what he does from a points standpoint. But so much of, Iowa State's offense revolves around him. And he's such a good passer out of the post. When you double team him, he makes you pay. And to me, it felt like he's kind of the straw that stirs the drink. I mean, Tamin Lipsey is a traditional point guard. But he's not, when he's asked to score a little bit more, and he really did it well in this game, but he's not a guy that you feel like, at least I didn't feel like he'd go out and score, 25, 27 points. And, Milan Momcilovic, who missed some shots that you'd expect him to make usually, so much of what he does is hitting 3-pointers and is not a great 2-point scorer. And it's got to be a lot of him running off screens. And I thought Tennessee's plan to defend him was absolutely fantastic. And a number of guys, we talked about who we thought they might put on him. And, it ends up really being a lot of Bishop Boswell just kind of getting into his body, trying to make him uncomfortable. I thought he did a great job. And then, I think a halftime adjustment, what Tennessee did offensively, just getting Iowa State's super aggressive ball screen defense. Tennessee was not able to get really much off of their off-ball actions in the first half. It led to a lot of turnovers. It led to a lot of kind of desperation, a lot late shot clock. And you saw them in the second half say, we're going to go to the ball screen early in the shot clock, and we're going to hit the short roll, and we're going to let our big men be facilitators and play 4v3. And I thought Tennessee, in a lot of ways, kind of flipped Iowa State's aggressiveness defense against them and did a little bit better job taking care of the ball, but also got a lot of really good looks out of it. So definitely, I thought the game plan coming in was really good, and I thought the adjustment at halftime of Tennessee straying away from a lot of the off-ball movement and off-ball screens that they typically like to run, and getting it early into ball screens and putting trust in their big men to make good decisions with the ball in their hand. It really paid dividends.
Yeah, no doubt. Here was the thing. I remember when we were previewing this game last week, Ryan, and we talked about one of the biggest concerns we had was Tennessee's ability, or maybe their inability, to take care of the ball against a really aggressive Iowa State defense. All the good things that Tennessee did helped neutralize the fact that Tennessee they had 17 turnovers. I'd say going into that game, if you told us they were going to have 17 turnovers, we'd be like, that's a little nervous making. But they had such an edge in so many other areas, it's like it didn't matter.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think 10 of those turnovers in the first half, really it was all very tight in the first half, but Tennessee led for most of the first half. And really when they lost it, they had maybe the last 2 or 3 minutes of the first half, they had back-to-back turnovers that led to Iowa State buckets, and they trailed. And then, Tennessee was able to steady the ship and actually, got 2 stops and a bucket to go up by a point at halftime, which I thought was big. So, no, 100%. And it was kind of to your point, it was opposite from a lot of Tennessee games, in the sense that, Tennessee did not just massively take way more shots than their opponent, but they shot well despite the turnovers, and obviously just crushed Iowa State on the offensive glass, which we thought would be a strength, and did a little bit better job converting those offensive rebounds into points than they did at other points in the season.
Yeah, Vols had almost as many offensive rebounds in the game as Iowa State had total rebounds as a team for the game. I mean, crazy numbers. Got a quick tip of the hat. Of course, Jacoby and Nate had good games. I mean, those two, that's kind of necessary when we get wins. Man, Jalen Carey and Felix Okpara both with double-doubles, man. I mean, Jalen Carey was a story in this tournament for us. I mean, a good one. He didn't play much against Miami, but after that, I felt like he was a factor in pretty much all of our tournament games, even the loss against Michigan, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, he was really the only one in the back half of the first half of that Michigan game that could give Tennessee much offense, and certainly even that wasn't a lot of offense as Tennessee went cold. But Carey I thought played 3 of his better games of the season in the last 3, and it just kind of as a whole, Tennessee, they were a flawed team this year, and they made a run because they played 2 of their better games. I'd probably say 2 of their 3 or 4 best performances of the season in the round of 32 and Sweet 16 when they needed it. And, that's what was, they were able to do to get over the hump, or not get over the hump, but get back to the Elite 8. And that's what I questioned whether they would be able to do going into the tournament, is put those games together at big times and play complete games. And neither of the Virginia and Iowa State games were, 100% complete, but about as strong as Tennessee had played all season.
Definitely. So they advanced to a 3rd straight Elite 8. One of only, I think, 2 teams in the current era that can stake that claim. I mean, current stage of time. I think it's them and Duke, right? I believe they're the only.
Last 3 years, yep.
Yeah, the last 3 years. So their reward is to play a Michigan team that we've been talking about all season long. They are elite. They are very good. We all felt that about the only way this was going to swing our way is playing a perfect game and maybe even having Michigan be a little bit off. And it wasn't perfect for Tennessee. Nowhere near it. Michigan had a lot to do with it. They just rolled the Vols by 33 points. We're not going to spend too much time reconciling this one. It's just, the story was really told in that 21-0 run in the first half by Michigan. Yeah,
and no doubt. And Tennessee, really hung in there the first 8 minutes. They avoided the terrible start that got them a year ago against Houston, but just struggled to get any good looks at the rim as we expected. Michigan's rim defense is so good, and Tennessee didn't shoot the ball well from the perimeter. And I think really one of the big differences is in the first 10 minutes, Tennessee did a good job of rebounding their misses. But then as the game got away from them, Michigan did a really good job of not only grabbing rebounds, but then throwing the ball out in transition and getting good looks. I thought there's probably an element of recency bias here. About as good as any team I can remember Tennessee playing it when they got the offensive rebound, being able to get it out on the wings quickly and get good looks. And you just knew if Tennessee was going to win, they were going to have to drag Michigan into a half-court game. Michigan,
Yeah.
Plays super fast on the offensive end. They want to shoot within 10 seconds. And in that stretch where things got away from Tennessee, that's what happened. And it wasn't like Tennessee turned the ball over and Michigan, got a lot of easy, pick sixes or runouts like that. They got numbers. Yaxel Lindenberg's so difficult when he gets going downhill. And, also a little Cam Boozer-esque too, and just his ability to pass the ball well and make good reads. And Michigan certainly knocked down open shots there in that stretch when they had them.
Yeah, it gave me a little negative flashbacks or PTSD to that Florida Atlantic loss, which, was a Dusty May team. It felt like the way they moved the ball. If I'm not playing against them, my team's not playing against them, it's fun to watch. It just
100%.
felt like Florida Atlantic all over again, except with much bigger and more athletic dudes.
Yeah, I'm blanking on his name. Vlad.
Vlad Golden.
Where did he go last year?
He was at Michigan.
He was at Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah.
With him and the kid from Yale. I mean, Mara has just a better Vlad Golden, really, but kind of has that same vibe to his game. But no, I think, like a lot of people, I think Yaxel Lindenberg is a very annoying personality, but super fun player to watch. And there's nothing really about the rest of that Michigan team that I found dislikable or anything like that. And certainly they play a fun brand of basketball. And, we're talking about them as being, or you mentioned that, I guess as anyone's listening to this, Greg Polinsky's probably been on the drive today, as y'all pre-taped earlier, and he talked about like a potential generational team. And, I don't necessarily disagree with that. And you're talking about a team that's leading scorer averages like 14.5 points per game, which I think speaks to, how they play basketball and what a fun brand it is to watch. And so many different guys that can beat you on any given night.
No, it's true. It's true. And, what's crazy is another Final Four team, and we're going to be talking about the Final Four here in a few minutes, but Illinois, hard to believe. Here's Illinois in the Final Four, and they lost Morez Johnson to Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, just think of that, too. Just think about how talented Illinois is without this kid. And, I mean, there's just a lot of talent in that Final Four. And I honestly think Tennessee, let's be honest, too. I mean, I don't think they could have beaten really any team in the Elite Eight except for probably Iowa.
Yeah, I wouldn't have picked them to. I mean, I think Tennessee could have beaten Purdue. They could have beaten Illinois. They could have beaten, even Duke and UConn, I'd say they have an outside chance of beating them, but certainly wouldn't have picked them to beat anybody besides Iowa. And even Iowa would have felt like a toss-up game with the way the Hawkeyes were playing down the stretch.
No, it's true. But it's definitely a massive difference between like Michigan and Arizona and then the rest of the field. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think we would have said those two and Duke before a tournament, but it certainly didn't prove to be that way. Not only the fact that Duke loses, but Duke was just tested, every round. It felt like they were in a tough game, whereas Michigan and Arizona have just bludgeoned people. And, it's kind of always the interesting thing with matchups of, I heard a lot of people say Michigan is a good matchup for Tennessee because they're kind of the same way. And I guess it always depends on how you look at it. I've thought Michigan's a bad matchup for Tennessee all year because they're the same way. They're just a lot better version.
Right.
Always the styles makes fights. If a team's better than you and you play a different style, then you can try to dictate the terms of the game and get an edge that way. It was going to be hard for Tennessee to do that because, can you think, was there another game this year? Probably Illinois with Ben Humerchich, or however you pronounce his last name, would have been the lone exception of like a team that, Tennessee, whether Nate played well or not, most teams, Nate was a matchup problem for them at the 3 spot. Michigan has a dude that's the same size and is a 6-year senior who's got, 30, 40 pounds of muscle on Nate. So it kind of flips. And certainly Michigan had a lot more guards that could hit shots. And, a front court that was built the same way as Tennessee, but was better and more consistent. And, that's, I had said, I don't know if I even ever told it to you, but it was sometime, I guess it was probably around Christmas, maybe Thanksgiving, but I was sitting at my parents' house watching Michigan play, and I was like, I can just see it right now. Tennessee's season is going to end with a 20-point loss to Michigan in the Sweet 16, because I thought Tennessee would be a 4 or a 5 seed at that point, and it ends up being in the Elite Eight and ended up being by 30. But and I didn't, Tennessee was playing well. I didn't think Tennessee would lose by as much as they did, but it was very difficult to see a path to Tennessee winning that game going in, just with how good Michigan is and how similar the builds of those two teams are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add, I think Arizona kind of fits that bill too. When you talk about kind of like, I mean, they play a lot interior wise, they don't shoot that many threes, but it's like what you said with Michigan too. I mean, if there's some parallels with Tennessee, okay, we'll grant you that, but they're so much more talented in that attack than Tennessee, similar to Michigan.
Yeah. And I think, I would say Arizona would have been a little bit better because of the fact that they don't shoot as many threes. Like Michigan plays that way and shoots a lot of threes. And just from a statistical standpoint, when they make them, which they have in the tournament, it's just hard to keep up. Not that, I don't think Tennessee would have been able to play a super close game against Arizona either, but just the numbers game aspect. And yeah, I don't have I think I saw some national guys have some good numbers on it. And I can't remember exactly who, but basically pointing out Michigan shot the ball really well in non-conference play when you saw them beating the Gonzagas of the world by 30. And then during conference play, they really didn't shoot the ball very well.
Yeah.
Still went 19-1. Still won so many games, but you saw them play a lot of close games. And then now in the tournament, I think they've shot, at least since the round of 32 on, like 36% or better from three, and they're back to just killing teams. When they shoot the ball well, it's just going to be extraordinarily difficult for anybody to beat them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one more fun fact to put a bow on this, and then we're going to talk about moving forward instead of looking in the rearview mirror. But they ran this stat for the world to see on national TV. That Tennessee's been outscored 82-41 in the last two first halves of their Elite Eight games. So, hey, look, while it's great, I would not trade it for, well, of course I want to get to a Final Four and further, but, playing in the Elite Eight in back-to-back seasons, it's pretty great, but it's also clear that the program it's kind of hitting this brick wall now late in the tournament that, they can't break through, or as Rick Barnes said, they're that door that they need to kick down, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's two schools of thoughts that are both 100% true. Tennessee needs to get better, to be better equipped if they play a 1 seed, to be able to win, be able to beat. I mean, we've talked about it's been a big talking point in college basketball over the last 2 or 3 years that the best of the sport keeps getting better. These best teams are more efficient than they've ever been.
Yeah.
They are better than they've ever been. So Tennessee needs to do more to keep up. And look, we knew that Tennessee was a 6 seed this year. It wasn't like last year when Tennessee was a 2 seed and they couldn't keep up. That was obvious Tennessee needed to get better. And I think it just continues to be a lesson on taking advantage of your opportunities when they do come and when the breaks do go your way. I mean, the last 3 years, Tennessee has played the highest possible seed they could play in every game in the NCAA tournament. They've gotten no breaks with the bracket breaking their way. Now, Joshua Jefferson being out in the Sweet 16 was a huge break.
Sure.
And I can't help but look back to 2021 when the bracket broke perfectly for Tennessee. They would have had to play Nevada with Musselman in the Sweet 16 and Kansas State in the Elite Eight to make the Final Four if they could have gotten past Loyola Chicago. And then the same thing in that team, Kyle Alexander was hurt, but that team was equipped to do it. I think 2023, Tennessee was less equipped. They were limping down the stretch. Sakai had torn his ACL. They didn't have a point guard. They didn't have much scoring. But again, the bracket broke your way. Fairleigh Dickinson beat Purdue. You got 8 seed Florida Atlantic in the Sweet 16. You lose that game. If you won that one, you would have gotten what I believe Kansas State was a 3 seed that year. Yeah. So, there were chances for Tennessee in those years where the bracket broke their way and they weren't able to capitalize. And, it makes it hurt when you have these teams. And this year's, again, a lesser extent because this team was not one of Tennessee's better teams under Rick. But the 2 previous years when those were 2 of the 3 best teams under Rick and you played well in March, but things didn't bounce your way. Like it's a lesson that you got to, when the things do bounce your way, you have to be ready to capitalize and pick up those wins.
Now you got me thinking what could have been in 2023. They could have gotten to the final game that year, Ryan. I mean, they could have beaten San Diego State. They were,
Yeah,
it would have been a rock fight, but
first to 50.
yeah, but oh
But
God.
UConn might have been a rough championship game for
Yes,
Tennessee, but
most definitely.
nonetheless.
No, most definitely. Well, so the Vols finished the season 25-12, and the focus shifts to, like what we said, kicking that door down, getting past the Elite Eight. And it's clear that Coach Rick Barnes and the staff, they are off and running to address it. We'll start, though, with looking at the current personnel. I mean, the four players that are the seniors that are leaving, well, Graham Hurst, of course, and then Amari Abram, Felix Okpara, Jacoby Gillespie. Very likely to be losing Nate Ament to the NBA. I mean, I know there's some people holding out hope, but I'm going to be very surprised if he doesn't hear what he wants to hear from an NBA personnel executive somewhere and ends up going to the draft. Also, associate head coach Justin Gainey just named the new head basketball coach at North Carolina State. So there's a little bit of change in the air right now with the basketball program. Let's take a minute on Gainey real quick, because you've had much more interface with him than I ever did. Good story for him getting to go back to his alma mater. Not sure entirely what he's inheriting. I've seen stories about Trey Holloman, who transferred to State to play for Will Wade. He came from Michigan State. There's rumors he's trying to go back to Michigan State, saying, take me back. And I just don't know what Justin's got personnel-wise, but still big step for him, and certainly happy for the guy.
Yeah, no doubt. A guy that just in conversations over years, clearly, cared and kept tabs on NC State. I can remember sitting at before the exhibition game at Michigan State in 23-24, the game Dalton connected that dunk down, sitting on the bench during warm-ups talking to him. And NC State football had beaten Clemson the day before. And Dave Doran had made some comment about how NC State was a football school, and I got Gainey all worked up. And Gainey's a very even kill guy. That was probably the most worked up I'd ever heard him talking about how NC State's not a football school. And so that was kind of funny of a coming full circle. And I think he mentioned it in maybe the press conference or a breakout room yesterday, that when he was at the coaches convention 2 years ago, which is always Final Four weekend, where the Final Four is, he got an NC State Final Four t-shirt when they made it with DJ Burns. So cool opportunity for him. Riley Collins, who's had been Tennessee's assistant director of player development, is going with Gainey. He's getting his first head coaching job, or first assistant coaching job. And a dude that's really, really deserving of that opportunity. Worked crazy hard at Tennessee and was a key piece of, their summer development with players, ton of time in the gym. I mean, he lived at the arena, like literally for multiple years. He did not have a place to live. He lived at the arena.
Wow.
So you're talking about a guy that poured a lot into it. So that's the other guy that his, staff member that's left Tennessee. He's going with Gainey to State. And, I think both those guys incredibly well-deserving of the opportunity they're getting.
Well, I think that's a good segue then, so that's all the folks moving on, at least the ones that we know at the moment, because it's a different era, as we've talked about. Let's talk about who at the moment is returning. Rick Barnes affirms he's back for another season. You got to believe it after what I've seen in the last, we're recording this just a matter of days after that loss to Michigan, and he is out there and working it. So, I think he takes these kind of losses as a challenge, right? Of like, okay, so then we need to evolve, reiterate, try to make it try to create a better mousetrap, as they would say, to get to that Final Four. So he's back. As far as players, I mean, there's 9 of them, right? JP Estrella, Bishop Boswell, Jalen Carey, Amari Evans, Cade Phillips, who we almost forget about because he was hurt, Dwayne Brown, Ethan Berg, Troy Henderson, and Clarence Masamba. My question to you, Ryan, is with all those guys, they're all good core guys, like program guys, right? I don't view any of them, at least not in the current state, I don't view any of them as the guy. Meanwhile, I would say in this era, like we said, I have no doubt in my mind that some of these players are probably getting overtures, via their agent from other schools. So my question to you is, and I mean, it's a little bit of crystal balling here. How many of those 9 guys do you feel stick around? I'd find it hard to believe all 9 will stay. And who do you think might be the biggest flight risks out of the bunch?
Yeah, I would say I think 5 to 6 stay would be my guess. Yeah, as a in terms of flight risk, I think Troy Henderson's a flight risk. Um, and look, I'll say this to start too. I don't think there's anyone Tennessee doesn't necessarily is telling to leave. Now,
Right.
obviously, always the question is Tennessee's going to prepare an offer for these guys. A lot of times, those things don't match up on what they want. I'm continually curious about what Jalen Carey's fit is on this team moving forward. I think it became a lot foggier because of what you talked about. He did play well in the NCAA tournament, and talking to him in the locker room after the Michigan game, he said he wants to come back, and he said he wants to get in better shape and all that stuff that Tennessee wanted to do last year. But as I just said, Tennessee wanted him to do that stuff last year, and he had all the same resources he's going to have this year, and he didn't do it. So, we'll see, especially, again, as Rick Barnes talks about wanting to have more shooting. Certainly he doesn't provide that. So I'll be curious to see what happens there. I think, with Amari Evans and JP Estrella, I think those guys, 2 guys Tennessee really wants back, but I think, they're going to have to pay to get them back. They're going to have to, there's going to be guys that have opportunities. And as you said, people lining up to pay them if they were to enter the portal. And I think Bishop Boswell is probably the one that I'm most curious about. We've already seen, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, Tennessee adds Tyler Lundblade. I think Tennessee's going to be active at the guard spot, adding guys. I don't know if – I guess I would say it this way. Not that it's impossible, and I'm hesitant to discount Bishop. It was as good as he was last year. As much as I did last offseason, and he proved me wrong. I have a hard time seeing him playing 25 minutes a game again next year. Is he going to want to come back and maybe a little bit of a lesser role? Maybe he will. But Gainey was his lead recruiter. He's from North Carolina. Riley Collins is another guy he was super close with. That's all just conjecture for me. No one told me anything about that. That's just connecting dots and some of the stuff Tennessee's done to where I wonder about Bishop. And then I guess 2 other guys, Ethan Berg and Clarence Masamba. Berg, I think, will be back. Like I think he wants to come back. I don't think he's going to be a guy that costs Tennessee much, and I think he showed enough that Tennessee would be happy to have him come be an in the bench type guy who we'll see if he grows and can earn a bigger role next season. And then Clarence, I'm curious about. I could kind of see that going either way. I mean, I do know they like him, but I don't think he's ready to step into some huge role next season either. So that's the one that kind of feels like it could be dependent on how many other guys Tennessee has leave and how they're doing in the portal, I guess. How many guys they feel like they can get of their main targets. So all that to recap it, I would say I think Henderson, Boswell, Carey and Clarence would probably be in that top list of the guys I feel like are maybe the most likely, as opposed to Dwayne Brown, Cade Phillips, Amari Evans, JP Estrella, Ethan Berg. But there's guys in that list Tennessee's gonna have to pay to get back to, and we'll see if they can come to an agreement on stuff like that.
So I've got a scenario for you. If you were forced to have to part with either JP Estrella or Amari Evans, which one you taking?
Man, that's tough. And again, it's how all this stuff works together. It's like, I think if you told me right now, if I'm Tennessee's coaches and I figured it out today, I would say Amari Evans, because then I would work harder to get Bishop Boswell back. And those are 2 guys that have similar skill sets.
Yeah.
I'm high on what JP can be next year, and I still am, but maybe I'm a little bit lower after his NCAA tournament. Not that he was terrible, but he just didn't play great. But again, he's a guy that's so young, and I think he has all. It would not surprise me if he's an All SEC guy next year. So I would say give me JP back if those are my 2 choices. But like Tennessee's coaches, those are 2 guys I certainly want to see back in Orange next season.
JP's still got 2 years of eligibility, right?
Yes. Him and Cade will both be redshirt juniors next year. Came in the same year and medical redshirt, 2 separate seasons.
Yeah. Berg does feel like, and I've got a lot. Berg has grown on me. Maybe not so much the player, but all the stories we're hearing. And just the humility that guy has shown all the way through. He really is. It does feel like he's a team guy, and I'm with you. I think I see him sticking around. I feel like he's kind of like, man, I got this far, after some really rocky roads. I got to stick it out. So I'm with you. I think he does stick around. I am interested to see, like you mentioned it with Bishop Boswell and Justin Gainey. I do wonder, is it him, or could it be Henderson or somebody that maybe heads to Raleigh? I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, you hear Justin Gainey talk about what he wants his program to be, and it's a lot of the tenants that is in Tennessee's program, and
Yeah.
certainly Bishop represents all those tenants. So if Bishop does decide to leave, I don't know that he would go to NC State, but I would think NC State would want him given what he's proven on the court, and he's such a good culture guy of being able to set the tone. So it'll be curious to see. And I've just always felt long term it would be hard for Tennessee to keep both Amari Evans and Bishop Boswell. To me, it felt like it's possible, and it still is possible to do next year. But just in the long term, I'm sure both those guys want to be starters, and I'm not really sure those guys work enough, to beside one another.
Yeah. Well, so those are the guys. Again, that's part of the process now. There's like the re-recruitment, so to speak, of some of these players, and then there's also the portal, and the portal doesn't open until the 7th, I believe. So I guess that's the day after the national championship game, and then I think all hell's going to break loose, because there's a lot of players who have announced their intention to enter the portal, but there's not a whole lot that can, use the term conjecture earlier. There's a lot of conjecture floating around out there right now when you talk about players. I keep getting texts from people, I'm sure you are, of like, check this guy out, he'd be great in Tennessee. It's like, we want them all, but it's like, it's just not realistic. But you mentioned him a moment ago, and one has already committed, not signed, but committed to the Vols after quite a courtship in 3 days. Tyler Lundblade from Belmont.
Yeah, and that probably by the time people are listening, I think you will be signed. I think that'll be officially done here soon. But Rick Barnes sat up there on the podium and said they needed more shooting next year, and Tyler Lundblade brings them that. Here's a stat for you. There were 8 players that made over 110 threes last year at a 40% clip. Lundblade is one of 3 that will be back in college basketball next season. So you're talking about one of the best shooters returning in the sport. He gives Tennessee that. He is, all the stuff Tennessee does, running off-ball screens and pin downs and floppy actions, is stuff that he's really good in. He's really good at shooting what look like off-balance shots, on the move shots and knocking them down. So an elite shooter. I would say from a shooting standpoint, the Tennessee comp would be Chaz Lanier, but not as good as Chaz, not as athletic as Chaz. Not that Chaz was ever great as a pick-and-roll ball handler or great in creating his own shot, but Chaz could do that some. I don't think Lundblade can do that much, and I think it's going to be a bigger learning curve for Lundblade on the defensive end of the court, and that'll be the big question: is what he can, how much better can he get defensively, and how much can Rick Barnes trust him there? So, a really good shooter. We'll see what his role ends up being. I think he's a guy that will compete for a starting job, but I don't think it's been promised that. And we'll play minutes, but I don't think this is going to be the centerpiece of Tennessee's portal class or anything like that either.
Yeah, 93% free throw shooter too. Let the healing begin, right?
Yeah, start. Rick and his staff needs to start drawing up some inbounds plays to get it into Lundblade in the game situations, because that's the guy you want at the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd agree with me. I don't find this guy, based on what I've seen, video of him, etc. He's not a take you off the dribble guy. He's not a multi-level scorer. He is a catch and shoot player. Agree with me on that?
Yeah, 100%. Let me go find a stat for my story yesterday. You go on with whatever your next point.
Yeah, I think the other thing to add into this, so it's a good get. I'll ask you this question on the fly too. The fact that you're saying you expect him to probably sign in the next few days. So he doesn't, by being a grad student, that's what allowed him to make the visit, commit, etc. He can also sign. He doesn't have to wait till next week to sign.
Correct. Yes, he can. I expect him to be signed by the end of the day.
Great.
So yeah, it's all. It's not technically through the portal, essentially, is the gist. He's just a normal grad transfer. He doesn't have to follow the portal rules. He's in all the portal rankings. We'll call him a transfer portal guy but really a grad transfer. That's how the situation's a little bit different.
Yeah. So there's a lot of upside here. Everybody's excited about it, particularly the fact that we're moving so quickly and addressing an area of need so quickly. But to be clear, and I know you agree with me on this too, this is not a watershed commitment for Tennessee, right? There are clearly other areas. This is, to me, like maybe the third, what would you call it? Not option, but third priority, right? There's many priorities here that they need to address. So it's great that we're getting him, but we need much, much more than just Tyler Lundblade. I think some people have looked at it like, man, this guy's going to come in and score 25 a game. And it's like, no, man, I think he's a compliment. It could happen. That'd be awesome. But he's like a complementary piece that could space the floor, make us just much more effective offensively.
Yeah, 100%. He plays like Chaz Lanier, but I don't think he's going to have the impact that Chaz Lanier had.
Yeah, there you go.
Still going to need to add a point guard in the portal. They still need to add a rim protector. I think you could see them potentially add, kind of a stretch four type guy. We'll see what happens with some of those front court players that we talked about. And I think you could see him add a wing too, a three guard to replace Nate Ament. So a lot of different options or needs that Tennessee still has, and things they're going to target. I think it's real benefit in getting this one done before things get super, super crazy. To have a complementary piece that you expect to be a big part of your team done before everything goes nonsense next week.
I'll tell you one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I know you will be too, and I'm not even so sure it'd be in Tennessee's wheelhouse, but there's some names that are out there in the portal right now for sure, but one that I think could be destined for the portal just because of, again, I called it an arms race earlier, is we saw it a couple of days ago, an announcement from Tyler Tanner from Vanderbilt saying that he's signing with CAA. They're his people now, and in the social media post, it's him in a jersey with no name on it. None whatsoever. No Vandy, no nothing. And it just tells me that I think he's got people probably whispering in his ear, because we do know he's announced he's going to be coming back to Vanderbilt. I mean, playing in college would be the right way.
Has he announced that for sure?
Yeah, I thought I'd heard that. Well, maybe not a formal announcement, but the
CAA deal was like for NIL representation.
Correct. Before that, I had heard that he was saying maybe it was more like he's leaning towards coming back to school. That's
okay.
I do wonder how his game would translate to the pro game anyway. So I think this is he's probably got some really smart people talking to him right now. And I think he could break the machine in terms of, like, I don't know what the bidding would be for a kid like him if he ends up actually going into the portal.
Yeah, I would think it'd be pretty crazy. I mean,
yeah,
was really good. And I think, if anything, undervalued because of how good Darius Acuff and LeBaron Philon were in the SEC last year. Like,
right.
He was probably the third or fourth best point guard. It's the same thing you say with Jacoby of, I think, being undervalued. But yeah, I would think he'd be top 1, 2, 3 guys in the portal. But I don't know. I still have a hard time thinking he's going to be anywhere but Vanderbilt. I don't think Vanderbilt's hurting for cash payroll wise, and I would think that'd be a situation where they'd do whatever possible to keep him.
Yeah. One more name I'll mention who is in the portal, and maybe it's just all the similarities that have me intoxicated. It may not come to pass at all, but Somto Cyril from Georgia enters the portal, and he's 6'11" or 7 foot? Either way, he's a tall guy. And he, I think led the SEC in blocked shots. He's one of the tops in the country in it. Just felt like a lot of through lines to what we just had with Felix Okpara.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think they know each other because I think they both played at Hamilton Heights at one point in their high school careers. I know neither of them finished there. Okpara was at Link Academy in Missouri, and I think blanking on a Georgia guy's name. Help me out. Somto was overtime.
Oh, yes,
so, some through lines. I know Joe Tipton. I think it was Joe Tipton, one of the On Three guys, had an initial report. Arkansas was the early name to watch, but said that's one a lot of people would be involved with. So, I see that as a need for Tennessee, and even as Rick Barnes is maybe looking more offense, I think he's still going to want to get a rim protector. I saw just maybe an hour or so before we started recording, Providence starting center, who, boy, could I not pronounce his last name, is a guy to average 7, 8, and 2 block shots a year ago is in the portal. So there's been a handful of names. I think there's a Georgia Tech center who's kind of a rim protecting big in the portal too. So I think you'll see Tennessee go hard at one or multiple of these guys, but that's a spot I think Tennessee. It won't be as glamorous because they won't be attempting a lot of 3-pointers or averaging 15, 20 points a game last season. But that's an important piece for Tennessee.
Yeah, I guess to your point about Arkansas being maybe kind of projected there as a destination for Cyril, I think he was on his way maybe to Kentucky before Calipari left Kentucky to go to Arkansas. So there may be some remnant relationship points there too.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's prior relationship there. But again, I don't think Tipton didn't word it like it was a done deal. I think it's just that's the early team to watch, and I'm sure just about anybody that needs a center is going to be trying to get involved in that one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we wrap this up and then start to talk about Final Four and all the stuff surrounding that, this has been kind of fun talking about what could happen for Tennessee, the men's team. I'd be remiss if we didn't take a quick moment. Shout out to Ryan Sylvia, who gets to cover this dumpster fire on the regular. But the Lady Vols, the offseason collapse continues. There are now 12 players who have either left via graduation or they are in the portal. Talasia Cooper is the latest one as we're recording this. That's not a huge surprise given how kind of tense things were with her and Kim Caldwell at the end of the season. There's only one returning player at this point by my count, Ryan. It's Jada Civil, who's a good player. I mean, but man, Olivia Edwards, I saw some video of her this week at the McDonald's All-American game. She is a freak of a player, and she still talks in the mindset of, hey, I'm coming to Tennessee, but boy, it does make you wonder. I don't know what a realistic way forward for what was once a storied program, what that looks like right now. It is an absolute mess.
Yeah, and I know with Olivia Edwards, Gabe Lazo was her lead recruiter, and he's off to LSU. So we'll see what happens there. And yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a tough situation. It's hard to see not it getting better before it gets worse. I think they can be better next year still, but it's hard to see it getting close to where they want it to get, in the certainly next year. And I think even in 2 years would be difficult.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be very interesting. And that's what I'm saying. It's like there's part of me that for Kim Caldwell, it's like by all accounts, I mean, she's hired a new associate head coach. Bill Ferrara is coming over from Florida State. So by all accounts, she's staying. But it's like, man, the pressure going into next season now is going to be talk about tightening the screws. This one's going to be very, very tough, I think. So we'll be watching for sure. Let's talk about the Final Four. We have 4 really, really good teams gathering up in Indianapolis, 2 that we've already talked about, Michigan and Arizona, which, as we've said, it feels like it's been kind of them and maybe Duke, but then a lot of other good teams, but not at the level of what we've seen from Michigan and Arizona. You got UConn coming out of the East. They're the ones that unseated Duke, and then Illinois, who you have been banging the drum for Illinois all season long, and lo and behold, here they are in the Final Four. They take out Houston, and they were really impressive in doing it too. And that was in the Sweet 16, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then beat Iowa.
Yeah, and then beat Iowa. So I think it's a good Final Four. There's you look at it, just reinforcing what we've just been talking about the portal. Michigan, 4 of their 5 starters have come from the portal, and then you've got teams like Arizona and Illinois, and they've done so much work as far as overseas pros coming over and playing. It's a really interesting narrative about all these teams that are in the Final Four. They're all very good in their own special ways, but man, this is so very different than what we saw in a Final Four, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, no doubt. It goes back to what we were saying about the top of the sport being as good as it's been. That you have two 1 seeds, a 2 seed, and a 3 seed
Right.
that make it. And there was 1 6 seed in Tennessee and 1 8 seed in Iowa in the Elite Eight. But besides that, it's everybody else 1 and 2 seeds. Besides Illinois too is the 3 seed. So yeah, I mean, I think I'll be excited to watch or excited to see how that Illinois-UConn game goes. I could see it either way. I think Illinois is the better team. I think UConn's more battle-tested in these moments. I think they'll have less of a happy to be there mindset than Illinois. I think being back at the Final Four for the first time since 2005. It's in many bad years of Illinois basketball in between. Weber and now where Underwood's got him. So that's an interesting contrast. And then to me, the true national championship game will be that Arizona-Michigan game. I think they've been the two best teams all season. Certainly Duke's had a case to make too, but to me, those have been the two best teams in terms of who they've had to do it against over the full course of the season. And certainly Michigan looks nearly unbeatable right now. So I'll be interested to see what Arizona has for them.
Yeah, it's scary to think we could have an all Big Ten championship game. Very plausible.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. And 2002 when the last time a Big Ten team won?
Yeah.
It was 2000 because now Maryland beat Indiana in 2002. So it would have been when Michigan State won in 2000. Truly
That's right.
Would have been.
That's right.
But in the last time. So it feels, I say that Arizona could easily win national championship, but man, it feels like this is the year for the Big Ten to break through.
Yeah, I think so. Let's go back for a second and recant who we had in the Final Four when the tournament started. Do you recall who your Final Four picks were?
Yeah, I was so close to going 4 for 4. I had Arizona and Michigan on the right side of the bracket, and then Illinois and Duke. So Duke collapsed on me, but at the same time, I will say, from a winning bracket pool standpoint, no one's really got Illinois or UConn winning. It was a lot of Houston and Duke on that left side and some Florida making the championship game. So at least in one of my pools, in one of my bigger ones, I wasn't good enough in the early rounds to win. But in one of my smaller ones that has some money in it, if it comes down to Saturday, if Arizona is who I have as my champion, I just need Arizona to beat Michigan. If I get that, no matter what happens on Monday, I'll win one of them. So I'm all in on the Tobey Waka and the Wildcats this weekend.
There you go. I went 2 for 4. I got the one side of the bracket correct. I had Arizona and Michigan. I have Michigan winning it all, by the way.
Okay.
But I had them beating Houston for the national title. So I had Houston coming out of the South. I believe it was St. John's coming out of the East. I just was so enamored with the Rick Pitino story of, getting a 4th program to a Final Four. Although they were right there.
Close.
They were close. They were close. But so I went 2 for 4. You came, you're right. You came exceedingly close to going perfect.
Yeah. And I don't like going to full chalk, which is part of why Illinois got in there. But, it's what we said. The top of the sport's been so good. And Duke, Michigan, Arizona have been the 3 best teams all season. It was hard for me to pick against any of them. And certainly Duke looked more vulnerable over the course of the tournament. But still, was a major collapse both in the second half and a major collapse in the last 10 seconds away from getting back to the Final Four. So it feels that way. The trend is continuing to be these top teams making it to the Final Four.
Last thing about Final Four, the current Final Four, kind of almost a distant memory. I had to be reminded that Illinois and UConn played each other, right? I think they played on Black Friday.
In Madison Square Garden, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
UConn rolled Illinois in that game, if I'm not mistaken. So familiarity there. And, honestly, some of the teams some of the matchups we've seen or the potential matchups, it felt like there was a lot of potential familiarity in some of these obviously the Iowa-Illinois game was a conference game. Iowa-Nebraska was a conference game. It was a lot of teams that we felt like we either seen this year or were, we were close to a Purdue-Michigan matchup again. Maybe it's just the Big Ten being so good. It felt like there were a lot of familiarity once we got deeper into the tournament.
I was listening to Field of 68, who always does a great job, and friend of the show, Mike LaTulip, was on there, and he's got Illinois ties. He played there. He reminded us when I was listening that when they played each other on Black Friday, Illinois and Connecticut, Illinois was playing like this Petrovic kid. He played like 26 minutes, and another guy, Brandon Lee. I mean, there were guys that aren't even seeing the court now on that Illinois squad that were playing in that game. So it's almost like you can't fully base the sample of what happened in the Garden too much to factor into this game.
Yeah, and I think that's the nature of the sport too. And
yeah.
And you said it. It was Black Friday. So that was a long time ago. Tennessee hadn't lost to Vanderbilt in football yet.
Yes.
Everybody, all the Tennessee football fans, I don't know if the vibes were great, but everybody at least was positive about Tennessee finally winning in the Swamp. And so it's college basketball is a long season, and these teams all change a lot. I mean, even for Tennessee's case, I mean, Cade Phillips was starting. Amari Abram had a much bigger role.
That's right.
There were a lot of differences, if you want to look at it from the Tennessee side of things when you're going back that far.
True. All right, last thing before we wrap up. We talked about it earlier. UConn gets to the Final Four by way of an electric last-second shot by Braylon Mullins that I think immediately etched itself into one of the great classic kind of game-ending shots that we've seen in the history of the NCAA tournament. So I thought it'd be fun for you and I, Ryan, as we wrap up, to maybe kind of pick maybe 3 moments that are up there at the top. And I'll start. For me, that Mullins shot, I'm not saying it's the one, but it belongs in my top 3. I mean, just given the fact that kid had not really shot well that game. And he's a sharpshooter by trade. I mean, that's what he was in Indiana in high school. But man, he took that shot. And also hats off to Alex Caravan for not rushing a shot himself and deferring and passing off. I mean, that one's up near the top of the list for me, with also the Leitner shot, of course, against for Duke against Kentucky way back when in 1991. You weren't even of this earth at that point. And then another one, I'm going to date myself, and you were probably just at best a little tyke at this point, but 1998, and it wasn't in the Final Four or Sweet 16, but Bryce Drew, with that inbounds play that they set up, length of the floor pass, they kick it to Drew in motion, who nails a 3-pointer. I think it was a first-round game. Valparaiso knocks off a really good Ole Miss team back then. Those are the 3 for me. There's many of these kind of shots, of course, but those are the 3 that I think for me are most memorable.
Yeah, and those are 3 really good ones. I mean, even with the Mullins thing too. He didn't shoot that well from 3 this year. He only shot about 33%. Now he made a lot. But it always felt like he was going to be a little bit better shooter than he'd been. So, I think 2 that just come to mind when I think of legendary shots is obviously the Jordan shot and what was that, 82 to beat Georgetown. And then a year later, Lorenzo Charles with the putback to win the title game for NC State. But I went all stuff that I can remember watching. I'm going, and this one kind of because they lost in the title game, I think gets forgotten in because it was the COVID year. But Jalen Suggs, the half-court shot to beat UCLA, in the semifinal. To me, Chris Jenkins is the all-time great.
That's a great
in
one.
The national champ, and it's the back and forth. I mean, Marcus Page hits the crazy shot to tie the game right before. I'll go to my grave saying Marcus Page, and I'll have an honorable mention that I'll throw in here. He's another one of these guys. He'll get forgotten about because they never won a national championship when he was there. But he had so many clutch moments, even in games they lost. He had so many clutch moments in his time at UNC. And then the other one, I decided to go with an upset one too. But Paul Jesperson for Northern Iowa, the shot he hit to beat Texas, the half court shot was kind of the upset. RJ Hunter's another upset one winner that comes to my mind when I think of those first round ones. But Jesperson's shot is one that I'll always remember.
Speaking of Northern Iowa, there was also Ali Faroukmanesh, I think was his name, against Kansas.
Yes.
And I think that was first round as well.
Yeah, I think so. And then a couple other honorable mention ones I had. Trey Burke is the other player like Marcus Page that I think of. He never won a national championship, but he had so many clutch moments. He hit that crazy deep three in the last seconds against Kansas in the Sweet 16 to force overtime the year they lost to Louisville in the title. That would have been 13. And then Chris Chioza, one of my favorite, it's Florida shot, so I don't love that aspect of it. But one of my the runner, the 3-point runner to beat Wisconsin or in the Sweet 16. Maybe that was the lead. I think that was a Sweet 16 game. In 14. Yeah, no, it would have been maybe 17. I think it was 17 because I think that was the year South Carolina made the Final Four. So that's another one that comes to mind of those clutch last-second shots.
I mean, isn't it funny? You could go on and on. Like Derek Queen, was it just last year for Maryland?
Just last year, yeah.
I mean, and then and maybe a couple of years ago, Furman? I don't know the guy who did it, but the guy who knocked Virginia.
Yeah, he. What's his name? He's from Nashville. He played at Hillsborough High School, and he transferred to Auburn. Never did anything on that Final Four team last year. I want to say someone Haggerty, maybe. Maybe I'm thinking of the Kansas State guy. I don't know, but yeah, that's a good one too. That play felt similar to the Mullins one, with the deflected pass and desperation pass.
Yeah, wow, we could go on and on. That's it's pretty amazing when you start going down memory lane like that. But that's going to do it for this week. Now, next time we talk, we will have crowned a new national champion. The transfer portal will be officially open. We'll talk about all of it as much as we can, most notably any developments for the Vols, and that could be not only coming in, but also players possibly going out. So we'll talk about all that. Again, we appreciate you checking us out. As always, as a reminder, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for the show on YouTube. Download our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're available anywhere you look. In the meantime, keep it locked in on Rocky Top Insider at rockytopinsider.com and on all of our socials for the very best in Tennessee athletics coverage. Ryan will be covering basketball still, but we got spring football coming, baseball. We got a heck of a lot of SEC baseball to cover. You'll be in the midst of that this weekend, right, with LSU?
Yep, be back over there all 3 games this weekend. So plenty of that. I always hate that because it makes it tough to watch the semifinal games on Saturday night, but we'll have an iPad up to watch and probably be done by the time we get rolling in the second half of the late game.
Yeah, you're the man. Well, listen, as always, Ryan, it's a blast being able to do this show with you. Thank you for your contributions to the show all season, but everything else you're doing for RTI. I hope you have a great weekend. Look forward to doing this with you the next time.
Yeah, sounds great. Happy Easter, everybody.
Yeah, and to all of you out there, yes. Thank you very much for giving us some of your time. Enjoy the few last games that are left in this college basketball season. Have a great and joyous Easter. And we'll see you next time with another episode of the RTI Rim Runner.